What do you call old? And what age do you start to consider altering their programming?
Wow, that's an incredible question. You
I
can't
love that
call
question.
old is not. You cannot call old. I have met 60-year-olds who train like 20-year-olds, and I have met like 40-year-olds who train like 80-year-olds. It's
That's me.
because the thing people have to understand about age is that it doesn't make it makes everyone less effective than they were when they were younger, but it doesn't make them less effective than other people, right? It's variance based on what they were when they were like 23 and they were a hormonal superhuman. So when I meet someone, it's who's 65 or 70, the only difference is that I have to look for a wider range of variability in what they might be able to start out with and where they might be able to end up, because some of them are going to be able to squat 405 pounds 5 times, and some of them might never get past 35 pounds, or might not even get to that. But it does not mean that you can't lift heavy. It does not mean anything about how you're going to perform relative to other people, even other 20-year-olds, compared to, as long it's much more about where you were when you were 20 and where you are now.
This one drives me insane. There's people on the starting straight who are like, I'm 38, I'm an old guy now. What am I supposed to do?
Oh my God.
And it's just like, listen, you're not an old guy. Like, you feel like shit because you're terribly out of shape because you haven't taken care of yourself for 2 decades. It's not your age. It has nothing to do with your age.
I reckon a lot of that though comes because of professional sports, and when you're 30 in professional sports, you're washed up.
Yeah.
That's when people retire at professional
That could
sports.
be it.
And I think a lot of that's.
I hadn't considered that.
That's a very good point, actually. Hot takes
That's a
are
really
big.
good
I like
point,
that a
yeah.
lot.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it's like I have 60-year-olds who are doing unironically more volume than I am and responding better to it. So it's just like I don't really think it's I don't think it's an age thing. It's is that person taking care of themselves? Have they taken care of themselves? I think the on-ramp, like the first 3 months of actual programming, is what changes the most, because it's like you may run into a 35-year-old or a 44-year-old, and you're like, oh, we can probably just start them, like a normal dude, and then you realize any cope they had for work capacity is shit. Even the standard LP is too much work for them right off the bat. Any amount of aggressive loading is too much for them. They're hypersensitive to pain processes, all these things. Like, it really depends. It's super individual, but assume that you're going to do better than you can. Or that you are. Assume that you're still young, and it's like if you're 80, then you'll be like, okay, I'm probably going to have to start with old guy stuff. But be optimistic about it. Don't write yourself off if you're not 80 freaking years old.
Anything below like 70 years old, you should not assume. Really, you should never assume anything, no matter what age you are. But anything below 70, you are not old until proven old. And also, I wanted to ask Alex K, how much do you think is, because you mentioned that you've treated yourself like shit for 2 decades, how much do you think the whole old people, or the older you are the less you can lift, that kind of thing, how much do you think it's actual aging processes versus you just had more time to fuck yourself up and not deal with the things you needed to deal with, right? So if you're 25, you only had 5 years to detrain. If you're 45, you've had 25 years.
I hugely think it's that. I also think that the conditioning I think the most important thing is conditioning for pain processes, of being like, you have been actively avoiding discomfort for 2 decades, right? Imagine living that sort of life and then someone being like, all right, we're going to put you into a discomfort-based process where it's like, okay, your shoulder's going to hurt when you bench and your knee's going to hurt when you squat and your back's going to hurt when you deadlift, but you're just going to keep doing it. And then for a lot of those people, it is mentally such a huge cliff. It requires a literal paradigm change in what they think is okay, because most people actively avoid discomfort in every possible opportunity of their life, right?
And if you have done that for 40 years, it's going to take such a radical change in your mentality that it sometimes might not be possible for you. But unless you're bought into it, right? If you're ready to receive that information, then all bets are off. But that's honestly like above and beyond memory disorders, above and beyond cognitive decline, above and beyond everything else. The thing I fight the most with people who are all in their 6th or 7th decade and who have never heard of starting strength came to me because their grandson recommended it or whatever, the thing I fight is that. The thing I fight is that they're overly sensitive to pain and discomfort, and they interpret muscle soreness during an intra-exercise muscle soreness as strain and pain.
Yeah.
And this will hurt for a week. This will hurt for a month. I won't be able to heal through this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the other thing is just like people assume that because they have been professionally excellent, and most people have. A lot of people who find coaches just in general, you're already a high performer and we know it. You're already a type A person and we know that going into the relationship. And they'll be like, yep. I'm amazing in everything. I am the master of these domains that I'm in. It doesn't transfer, right? So it's like you can be a master of the 3 domains of parenting, being a husband, and being great at your job. It doesn't necessarily apply to you deeply understand how your body is going to handle pain, you know? And again, so like what Mitchell was saying earlier, it's just like a huge part of a coach's job is dealing with these things and the counseling process over time of being like, hey, you're actually much closer to invincible than you thought. You'll be totally fine.
Yeah.